earnings stories, and one of the world's largest oil supertanker operators, Euronav, reported earnings that missed estimates in what the company calls a challenging quarter. Well, joining us now is Hugo de Stoop. He's the chief executive of Euronav. Mr. de Stoop, thank you for joining us. If you look at your earnings per share missed estimates, what needs to happen now for your business to pick up again?
Yeah, thank you. Well, our market are very simple, so it's a question of supply and demand. On the demand side, we're missing a lot of cargoes. The OPEC, as you know, OPEC Plus have decided to cut, gradually come back up, but not enough to provide enough cargoes for the world fleet. And on the supply side, we are very surprised to see very little recycling, very little scrapping of ships, despite the fact that we have today an environment in terms of rates which is very poor. So it's really a combination of those two factors that will enable the market to return to positive territories.
Good morning, Hugo. Relative to some peers or some rivals, you've been relatively progressive in ordering ammonia-ready ships as we kind of try to decarbonize some of the shipping process. I'm curious why you went that route when some of your rivals went for methanol, like Maersk, for example. Is that a general view that synthesized ammonia will become much cheaper and more efficient, or were there some other factor in the decision why you've gone for the ammonia route?
No, in fact, not at all. We believe that the market of tomorrow will not be one single fuel. So you can already order ships that can burn LNG, and that's already a much better fuel in terms of CO2 emissions, but of course not the full greenhouse gas, because they emit methane, which is in fact worse than CO2. You have methanol that Maersk is going to use, and then you have ammonia, and there could be even other type of biofuels. The one element that we were missing in the ammonia story is actually the fact that today no ships can burn ammonia, and so we thought that we would join the yards, the classification society, and the engine manufacturer in helping developing the technology, which we hope will be ready by 2025. And when you look at the emissions, ammonia is probably the only type of fuel that does not have any emissions at all, because in fact the ammonia is just a carrier for hydrogen, and as you know, hydrogen has been named one of the future fuel that can be used by many different industries, including the shipping industry. So that's the reason why we're focusing on ammonia for the future, but we're not excluding at all LNG or potentially methanol for the future, and we believe that we're going to have a mixed fleet in the decade to come.
Mr. de Stoop, let me also ask you about the world's largest port, which is Ningbo. I think part of it was shut down because they found a worker testing positive for COVID-19. What's your experience in the port right now? Are they still allowing ships to come and go from that port?
So at the moment, yes, but on a very seldom basis. You have to know that all type of operation in the port does not need to happen with human contact. But of course, the Chinese authorities are very, very strict. Whenever they find a case, they will be very quick to shut down, isolate the workers, isolate the co-workers who have had contact with that specific worker, and then reopen as quickly as possible. So this is something that we have monitored for, the last 18 months, in fact. But it is true that the Chinese authorities are a lot stricter than authorities in other places around the world, and that disrupts the market all the time, indeed.
That kind of plays into a constant story of the past 18 months of seafarers being stranded at sea because COVID restrictions prevented easy crew changes. And obviously that's been an ongoing crisis. And I'm wondering what your kind of latest stance is on that crisis, given the new wave of the Delta variant in Asia and some of the restrictions it is causing at ports again.
Yeah, that's totally correct. So we had a severe crisis with many people extending their stay on board vessels for twice the length of their contract. So someone that was supposed to stay 3 months was staying 6 months, or even more than that. And some people stayed more than a year on board. So it was a real crisis. You can imagine the life of those people on board the vessels. The situation had become a lot better, but unfortunately the Delta variant means that we are returning to a lot of people on board the vessels with a contract that we need to extend because they cannot disembark. However, I think that the situation is improving in many places that recognize that a worker that has been fully vaccinated, so 2 shots in most cases, can disembark or can embark, because let's not forget also the people that need to travel to the vessels and replace the people who are disembarking more freely. So we hope that as we get more and more seafarers vaccinated, their situation to be relieved from work or to join a vessel will improve.
What do you think the latest virus outbreak actually means for Chinese demand for oil?
It's probably too early to say, and we need to see how the Chinese authorities are going to cope with it, because in the past they've been very, very quick to act, which meant that we had disruptions for maybe 1 or 2 months, but fairly quickly after that they were returning to some sort of normal life. I mean, a very different life than what we have here, but some sort of normal life with the economic activities picking up again. So I guess it's too early to say, but I'm sure it will have an impact. The length of that impact is the question mark here.
Obviously, there's a lot of lack of clarity here, and the situation is evolving. But you're know better than us, so I'm wondering what your outlook is for oil tanker rates over the next 12 months in context of the information you have at the moment. And I understand it's a dynamic situation, but what's your kind of best guess for where the trend is going to go?
Well, I mean, we had predicted that 21 was a year to be quickly forgotten. We are only at sort of the mid of 21. We had a fantastic year in 2020, so this is typically what happens in our shipping markets. They are very cyclical. We believe that the winter will probably provide more cargoes and therefore should lift the markets up, but it's too early to say whether that improvement will be enough to cover the break-even of the vessels. We see 2022 as much more encouraging, as we believe that the world would slowly but surely get out of the COVID situation. And if that's the case, then obviously the demand for oil will recover and probably recover to pre-pandemic level, sort of levels that we saw at the end of 2019. As far as the supply side is concerned, we hope that more vessels will be scrapped, but we don't see any reason why they wouldn't be scrapped, because the scrap prices are very, very high. And at the same time, the older the vessels, the less he earns on a yearly basis. So at some point, the owners will throw the towel.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hugo de Stoop there, Chief Executive Officer of Euronav. Now let's get straight to the